Hi, welcome to File Level Recovery demonstration for the Unitrends System Administration course. In this how-to video tutorial, we're going to take a look at agent-based file level recovery. It starts here in our environment once again. I've got my local source and my target opened up inside of here. In the Chrome browser here, once again, I'm logged in as myself. I also want to make sure anytime I log in that I check to see if there's any active alerts before I do anything. Now in this case here, this is my local source appliance. I can get to my recovery catalogs, right? If I want to do file level recovery in here, I can get into my recovery tab and I can get into my backup catalog in here and I can find the asset that I'm looking for to do file level recovery. So if I know I'm looking for the RDR server, I can filter over here in the right-hand side on the RDR server, and I can filter out for the RDR assets first. Now, once you filter on the asset name, you kind of have to look at the little icons in here, and your file level icon is just a straight icon here. This is VMware. This little icon down here, that's a classic image-based bare metal for RDR, so it shows up as a different icon. But it is the same agent-based client here, RDR Server 2 in this case. These are all agent-based backups. You can see that over here. If I want to put back something off the RDR server, I can choose any one of these recovery points. And you can see a differential here too. I'm running here a synthetic differential because it's either configured for a hot backup copy or cold backup copy job. So every day I'm going to get a synthetic differential. Now, one of the cool things you can do over here, if you want to see this, is you can actually take off your filter here and filter on the differential. And chances are these are all of your synthetic differentials. If you look at all of your assets here, these are your asset icons once again for your agent-based. You can see them over here too. But if you look at that breakdown, here's synthetic differentials. Each one of these machines has those synthetic differentials. That tells me I'm either configured for a hot or cold backup copy job for these agent-based assets. Right? If you have differentials in here, because remember, our backup jobs for our agent-based file level here, we got to remember what group these machines are in. They don't contain any differentials in the schedule. This is a weekly full and a Monday through Friday incremental schedule only here. You can see that. But yet in the recovery catalog, you may see differentials show up for those particular clients here. For your agent-based assets, you may see these differential points. Now you take that off, you go back to all. Once again, you're looking for a particular client in here. Once again, here's my RDR server. Here's all my recovery points. Let's just go to the newest recovery point that we have. And we're going to say at the top here in our toolbar, we're going to say recover files. This is probably the most common thing you're going to do is just go to the newest recovery point or the recovery point you want, and you're going to browse out into the backup. Here's your directory structure. You'll see multiple drives if you're backing up multiple drives. You would see a C, an S, an N, a V, right, if you had those drives included. All right, here we have the S drive excluded, so we don't even see it in here. Right, this is our Unitrends recovery point, right, and this is our full drive. Anything you want to recover in here, right down into the users, maybe the administrator, maybe he's got something in his downloads he wants you to recover, or his documents. Here he's got a bare metal recovery directory. Maybe he wants to recover these ISOs out so he can start some bare metal recovery. We can highlight this entire folder so I get every one of these. I'm going to get everything in that directory, and when you go to the next option over here is when you can start setting up the recovery options itself. Where do I want it to go to? What directory? What path? Do I need to exclude anything from this directory? If there were a bunch of AVIs or other stuff I didn't want to bring back when I brought this whole directory back, I could tell it to exclude some stuff too. So here we're going to take this and change it to our desktop. Then we're going to set our directory or path. Where do we want this thing to go to? Right? So we're going to do an agent-based recovery. We're going to just label this as our first agent-based recovery so we can see the different ones we're going to do once they're all done. Now, once again, you could go in and add an exclusion pattern to this recovery point. Once again, if you didn't want AVIs or MP3s, to be recovered, you could say, hey, I don't want any AVIs, no MP3s, no logs, no, those type of extensions. You'll also notice you have pre and post commands over here. If you do need to stop or start any services before you do a restore, you can do that too. A bunch of options at the bottom for preserving the directory structure, overriding existing files, restore newer files only too, not on by default but can be valuable. Set the file dates to today is pretty valuable if you're trying to prove to somebody, hey, these are what I'm bringing back, and it's going to set the date to today so you can see the difference in the directory right away, that these are recovered today, right now. And then there's also a Unix text conversion that's on by default. Sometimes you do have to turn that off if you're going between Windows and Linux and back and forth. So be aware of that setting down there as well. It depends on what your files are and what they're doing and if they need to be converted, first of all. When you save this job down here at the bottom, it's basically like saying, restore. It's going to go ahead and start the actual file level recovery through the agent now. So in my jobs over here, I'm going to see an active job doing an on-demand restore of that file and folder recovery. You can see that restore in there. Okay, I happen to have another Oracle backup running at the same time. We're just going to let that thing run. But you can see this restore is taking, going through the queue process now here. If you go down to your disk, you go to that machine, whatever directory, wherever you told it to restore, you're going to see we left on preserve the directory structure. So we see from that directory that we created, we see whatever we told it to recover out there. And you can see back here now, the restore job is done. That tells me that these files are all completely put back as well too. That restore is complete. Now, I could have just went to the recovery catalog, and if I wanted to bring back that directory, and I knew that directory doesn't change very often, I could have came out here and said, give me a bare metal recovery -ISO, right, and match the case. But I'd also have to put maybe wildcards around it here so it looks for the directory. That would allow you to search out here, kind of see where that bare metal ISO directory is. You could highlight it from inside of here, right? If that directory was captured in a master or one big differential all at once, it'd be rolled up into a synthetic full or differential, right? And you could highlight it from here, and that'd be the same recovery. But now you could also do like an asterisk.iso. Maybe you're looking for one particular, maybe you're looking for one particular type of file extension in here. You can also search for those direct file extensions. Maybe logs, .doc, whatever type of extension you're looking for. Now, searching for .doc might be a little crazy on a file server, right? You can also narrow it down by date range, by size. There's also the advanced down here is just the regular expressions, which is just like putting wildcards around this. I could also do a search for asterisk ISO, and this search would bring up those 4 files as well as a bunch of other stuff. Here's that directory, right? Here's the actual ISOs themselves, and you can see a few other search results that match that ISO somewhere in either the path or this file name in here. Right, so somewhere in here is an ISO all the way down this list. Now, whatever you choose to recover from in here, let's do one here. Let's bring this one back here, just this ISO. Now, if I choose to recover this from here, this ISO is going to go back to this directory. This time I'm going to name it Agent 2 so you can see the difference, and I'm going to take off the preserve the directory structure. And we're going to go ahead and say save, which is just like starting that file level recovery job once again. Now this job's going to run a lot quicker in here as well too. So you can see this job queuing up and starting. All right, and then eventually once you kind of see this go to a certain percentage, that kind of tells you that, okay, out here, it should have reached the agent, and under this temp restore eventually here, I'll see once this gets to a percentage, I should see the agent 2 directory show up, and then I'll see my restored content in that directory. There's the Agent 2 directory showing up there. There's my single file without all that directory structure. Remember, this job here, we left on all that structure. You have to go all the way out there to get to that file. When you take off that one setting right there, it allows you to go ahead and see that single content out there with all that structure being preserved. This is a great way to put back a single file, maybe to your workstation, your laptop. You want to scan it, check it out, open it up, make sure it's the right version, whatever you got to do to it before you put it back to the server. You don't want all that structure out there. Or maybe you do, because then you can just drop the root of that structure back onto the server. All right, a lot of different ways you can do that, but at least this is giving you some good ideas of how this works. All right, now searching is extremely powerful. Once again, you can go over to that recovery tab. You don't have to highlight or filter on anything over here. You just go right into the search files, and you're searching across the agent-based assets. Okay, you can also notice in here you can search across NAS too. It's really similar. There's also a separate demo on NAS recovery, so check that one out if you have NAS. But it's really similar. I could search across my Exchange directory here, and I could pull out any log files for a particular user. All right, let's just search for me. This is my user name across the Exchange server. Here's some sort of log file that I have for the Exchange server right there. I can recover that back to any server, any location I want. This time we'll go ahead and do Agent 3. We'll preserve all that structure so we can see where it was originally at when it does the restore. Right? And you may leave it to the same server and overwrite and make it set to newer files only as well too. I'm just not overwriting anything original here in my examples. Now it is 12 o'clock. I did have a bunch of other backups kick off here during my demo. You can see your restore running here. It does kick up and queue off right away, even though it has a bunch of active backups. All right, it's not going to wait for those backups to finish off. All right, once again over here, once it starts to make that restore connection, you'll start to see this directory. In this case, we did preserve the structure. So out here, I can now see my log file for my account. So again, you may have to do certain things with the rights, depending on where and how and what you're doing, what kind of recovery. If it goes back to the original location, it would have the original rights. All right, you can see it's already off the list. You can see it under recent system jobs. Any restores that you do will show up in the recent system jobs in here. You can see the 2 restores here. All right, you can sort it by started once again. Make sure you're looking at the newest stuff. Here's those 3 Win 7 desktop recoveries I did right at the top of my list. All right, but here you can see the newest restores that we did today. Now you can also go over and run a report over here. There is recovery reports that will show you any restores that you have done. So if I do go back in time, any restores that I've done for these assets, I can go back and filter on these. Right, there's the restore that I did back on March 9th for this asset. And there you can see it. Right, here's all restore objects on one screen. Now I did a lot of recovery to my Win 7 desktop, and here's the recoveries that we did today. I wanted to show you that so you don't get confused. I recovered stuff from the RDR server, but I restored it to my Win 7 desktop. So in the recovery history, you're going to see it as the protected asset you restored it to. If you're going to and from and back and forth to the same server, that really doesn't make a difference. But in most cases, you're going to go to a different asset, you're going to test the process, maybe the same asset, just different directory. Well, in that case, it would all show up in here like the same server. So you can see that the only server I did to the RDR server was actually here, a failure I had on a bare metal test I ran earlier. Right, you can see that recovery there for that asset, a totally different recovery, just giving you some examples of how this recovery history works. You will see in your dashboard, the more restores you do, this does link to the recovery history report I just showed you. Now, this is not updated since 11:45 this morning. We ran these recoveries since then. So if I click this refresh button and run the restores, and I look at the number down here, I'm at 43 total restores. That's total. It's kind of misleading, but if I look at the dashboard now, there's 29 restores done in like the last 7 days. We've added 3 more today. All right, but in the last date range of the report, if you run it here, you'll see 43 total because that's going all the way back. Okay, a lot more recovery since the 5th. All right, so that's a pretty good overview on file level recovery.